Welcome to the Narrative Keys, where we break down the narratives behind the headlines and map the hidden links clearly. By the time the internet turned Charlie Kirk's death into 100 competing narratives, Utah prosecutors had already put one version of events on paper. Not a live stream, not a thread, not a rumor, a charging document. That matters because this case now lives in two different worlds at once. In one world, it is a criminal prosecution with named charges, hearing dates, public filings, and a formal evidentiary theory. In the other, it is an online investigation built from fragments, reaction clips, timeline doubts, travel questions, leaked messages, institutional optics, and the growing feeling that something about the public story did not seem complete. This series begins in the first world, the filed record, the official baseline, the part no serious investigation can afford to skip. The purpose of this channel is not to flatten every source into the same level of certainty. It is to separate what is official, what is public record, what is alleged, and what is still only a lead. This is an active case. The charges are allegations. And this episode is built from public filings, public statements, and documented records, rather than internet repetition. Whatever else turns out to be true, this much is not internet folklore. Charlie Kirk died at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, in September 2025. Utah County later filed charges against Tyler James Robinson. Authorities publicly described the event as a targeted attack, and as of March 27, 2026, the case is still moving through the Utah court system. That is the baseline. Not every motive question is settled, not every online theory has been tested, but there is a real case, a real defendant, and a real paper trail. And that paper trail tells us something important right away. The state is not treating this as a vague public mystery. It is treating it as a prosecutable homicide case. And when this series makes legal claims, it should name the legal basis. FOIA under 5 U.S.C. 552 applies to federal agencies, not private nonprofits. A public record route is not the same thing as proof against a private entity. Later, when we examine Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action, we also have to measure them against the legal standards attached to a 501c3 and a 501c4, not just against internet instinct. According to the charging information filed in Utah County, Charlie Kirk was speaking at an outdoor Turning Point USA event at UVU. The filing describes an elevated rooftop position, a recovered bolt-action rifle, and DNA evidence that prosecutors tied to Tyler Robinson. It also includes obstruction and witness-tampering counts. That means the state is not alleging only a fatal event. It is alleging a larger sequence that continues into the aftermath. That matters because once a case moves from death into concealment, the public starts looking not only at what happened, but at what happened next. If the official record is this specific, why did so many people still feel that the story was incomplete? Part of the answer is simple. The public did not encounter this case in a calm legal order. They encountered it backward. They saw clips before filings. They saw reactions before counts. They saw institutional optics before they saw the state's sequence. And for many viewers, the distrust did not begin with forensics. It began with public response. The pace of statements, the tone of appearances, the feeling that some people seemed more focused on controlling narrative than confronting what had just happened. Now, optics are not proof. They are not charges. They are not convictions. But optics do shape trust. And once trust breaks, every later contradiction begins to feel larger. That is the environment in which popular YouTubers became central to the alternative investigation. Some worked in the granular layer: timing, movement, travel, witness placement, alibi pressure, and institutional anomalies. Others took those scattered leads and packaged them into a larger public narrative about motive, concealment, betrayal, and hidden power. That does not mean they are right about everything. It does not mean they are wrong about everything. It means millions of people are now learning this case through a structure built outside the courtroom. And that is why so many viewers feel lost, because the information did not arrive as a staircase. It arrived as an unranked stack. The most emotionally charged leads reached people before the most basic official facts did. This series is not going to ask you to stop questioning the official story. It is going to ask you to question in the right order. We are going to separate 5 things: official, public record, documented but disputed, lead, and speculation. If a claim comes from a filed document, we will say so. If it comes from a statute, an IRS rule, an Arizona entity record, or an official complaint route, we will say so. If it comes from a public statement, a witness account, a creator timeline, or a leak, we will say so. If it is compelling but unsupported, we will say that too. Because a contradiction is not automatically a crime. A strange public response is not automatically a conspiracy, and a theory repeated often enough does not become true by repetition alone. This is not an anti-theory series. It is an anti-shortcut series. To understand every lead that came later, you have to start here, at the filing, at the official baseline, at the moment Charlie Kirk's death became a case, before the institutional questions, before the deeper network theories, before the public reaction analysis, before the biggest speculative leaps. Because if you do not understand what the state says happened, you will never be able to judge whether the alternatives are stronger, weaker, or simply louder. In the next episode, we go to the scene itself, the event layout, the roof, the path, and the 15 minutes before everything changed.